Touka was a weak boy who was constantly bullied by his parents. 10 years later, he suddenly finds himself thrown into a dungeon filled with S-rank monsters. How did he end up there? God. Once again, he was betrayed, this time by his classmates and even the goddess who had summoned him. But after turning his once useless skills into overwhelming power, Touka encounters a mysterious wizard who holds the secret to killing the gods themselves. Touka is a kid who is born into a cruel family where both parents are abusive and violent toward him from an early age. As he grows up, he realizes they only use him to vent their anger. When he turns 10, he understands he must kill his parents in the future, or they will kill him. But in the end, they abandon him, and Touka is taken in by his uncle's family. They are kind and help heal the emotional scars he carries from his parents. Their kindness inspires him to become a kind person in return. However, things change a few years later. Touka no longer thinks about being kind to others. He stands in the middle of a large room in front of his classmates, but instead of friendship, they ask for his last words. He cries but decides to toughen up and advises them to be ready for him once he comes back alive. Touka suddenly gets teleported away and ends up in a dark dungeon. He uses magic to light up a lamp and notices a broken skull on the floor. He feels confused and doesn't understand what happens, but he suddenly feels an instinct to get down and dodges a monster's attack. Touka feels nervous and shivers with fear, but he begins to run away from the monster that chases him. He follows his survival instincts and realizes he isn't scared, but frustrated. He remembers how he got into this situation. He and his classmates sit inside a bus on a school trip when everything begins to shine, and everyone ends up in a strange, large room. They look up and see a woman who calls herself the goddess Vicious, welcoming them to this new world. Touka and the rest feel confused, but she explains that this country is alien, and that she summoned them to defeat the Great Demon Empire. 200 years ago, the Demon Lord was defeated by heroes from another world, but he was recently resurrected. So Vicious decides to call the whole class to be the heroes that will defeat the demon again. She adds that their only possibility to return home is by getting the heart of the Demon King. The classmates feel confused but decide to help the goddess after watching her sacrifice a human to a monster and blast it with magic. The goddess then asks them to take turns and put their hands on a crystal to check their talent and skills. Everyone finds out their skill levels, which range between D and S ranks. Touka quickly returns to the present and panics because of the monster. He wishes for a weapon and thinks he's doomed, but he refuses to die here. He decides to use his magic power on the monster despite not believing it could work. To his surprise, it works, and he uses this chance to escape. He remembers being told his skill was trash because it couldn't even work on low-level monsters and thinks he got lucky. However, he finds a bird-like monster just ahead that wants to eat him. Touka uses his skill again, and to his shock, the monster gets paralyzed. He was told that his skill wasn't supposed to work, but things seem different. He thinks people don't really understand his power and skills. He opens his status window and notices that he already has no mana after casting the spell that many times. He decides to test something. He believes his success rate with Paralyze is high and thinks he can combine it with the poison spell. He tests it and decides to take a rest while the monster bleeds for a while. However, there's a problem. His mana reaches 0 and the Minotaur monster returns to kill him. Touka freezes and remembers when it was his time to put his hand on the ball to find his power, but the goddess simply ignored him and called the next one. The goddess taught them everything about stat checking, but Touka notices his status looks weak. They are all at some flat 3. He notices that he also has a unique skill to inflict status ailments, and at that moment, the goddess explains that's a skill only he can use. However, Vicious now needs to focus on one last ritual. She orders Touka to come to her, but the guards push him away. He doesn't understand what's going on, but she explains that he's the weakest person in the room. The only E rank? She explains that in the past, the weakest one always dragged the group down. So she decides to make a test. She says that he stands in a teleportation circle that will take him to some ruins, and his job is to survive and return. If he does, he will be able to live his life however he wants. She reveals he will be teleported to the ruins of Disposal, but Touka thinks he can convince the goddess to stop by revealing his unique skill. However, the goddess reveals that status ailment spells, or skills, like Poison and Paralyze, are useless. Not only do they have a low success rate, but their duration is also short, and they barely affect low-ranked monsters. In short, she bluntly calls him trash tier, not only by his skills, but also by his rank. Touka tries to understand why he was summoned in the first place, but the other students just tell him to shut up because they are wasting time. Suddenly, a guy grabs Touka's shoulder and asks if he's okay. Touka notices it's Yasu, the bullied kid he always helped, and he thinks Yasu is here to help him as always. But Yasu gets mad and believes Touka, an E rank, should show more respect, because he's an A rank. He tells him to enjoy his last minutes alive. The goddess begins the ritual and gives Touka a leather bag, revealing that once summoned, every hero has a unique item, and that's his. An S-rank classmate complains and tries to stop this because it isn't fair, but the goddess knocks her out and tells everyone to say bye to Touka, their #1 loser. Touka gets angry at her words and behavior and tries to paralyze the goddess, but as a divine entity, she has a protective barrier that gives her total defense. Without waiting, the goddess activates the circle that brings Touka into the situation. His mind returns to the present, and Touka thinks for a second that someone could come to save him, but he knows it won't happen. yet he refuses to give up. Despite having no mana, Touka tries to cast Paralyze again but finds out each skill works only once per target. He thinks fast, casts Sleep on the Minotaur, and considers stacking multiple ailments on it. He casts Poison using his natural mana, which should be his life force. Suddenly, more bird-like creatures appear, and he decides this must be a test. He wants to see what lasts longer, his natural mana or their resistance to his status effects. He wastes mana to cast Paralyze on the monsters, but notices more coming from the side. He decides he will only accept death when he runs out of mana, and casts more spells until he reaches his mental limit. The monsters get closer and closer. Touka feels like he has one last spell left and gives it his all to cast it. Suddenly, the first bird-like monster he poisoned dies, and he hears a system message telling him he leveled up and restored his mana. However, he doesn't reach level 2. Touka's level skyrockets to 258. He paralyzes the monsters to the ground and realizes he can chain the effect to keep casting Paralyze. A pop-up appears revealing that his paralysis spell is now level 2. He understands he needs to use spells to level them up. He thinks he can gain more skills by leveling the ones he has, but decides to focus on surviving first. He notices that level 2 paralysis lets him target multiple enemies at once, so he uses it. He begins to think that his unique skill always works inside this dungeon and assumes it doesn't work on the goddess. He tests it and learns it has a limited range and still can't be used on the same target repeatedly. He casts poison on every monster until it reaches level 2 and begins to see them only as experience points. Touka checks his stats and notices he has over 8,000 mana and nearly 800 points in each attribute. He realizes his most important stat is mana and knows he is ruined if it dries up. Suddenly, the Minotaur dies, and he reaches level 277 with over 9,000 mana and more than 800 points in each stat. He sits down and waits for the monsters to die. He reaches level 395 before leveling Sleep to 2. He quickly reaches level 501 and thinks he must survive and leave this place alive. He prepares to deal with the remaining monsters, but they suddenly run away from him. Touka explores the floor and takes usable gear from past victims of the ruins. He searches for a way out but grows tired and hungry. He finds no food and decides his only option is to eat monsters. Suddenly, he notices that his leather bag crystal changes color. He feels the bag is heavier and checks inside. To his shock, he finds beef jerky in a cola bottle. He eats and drinks while wondering if the bag is a one-time item. Days later, Touka surrounds himself with paralyzed and poisoned monsters. He feels like he is losing his humanity because he massacres monsters without emotion. In the end, all monsters die and he reaches level 957. Days later, he continues searching for a way out of the dungeon and reaches a strange zone. He finds a door with a gem and pours magic into it to open. Inside, he finds what looks like a couple who were also discarded and chose to die there. He checks their items and finds gems, which he assumes will be useful outside. He investigates more rooms that require mana to enter until he reaches the last one. This one needs more magic than the others, but he also finds something interesting. He discovers a skeleton and a note from someone who claims to be the hero of darkness. Touka remembers the goddess said Yasu had the same power and was the new hero of darkness. The note states the hero was discarded by Vicious after defeating the demon lord. It also says that if the reader wants to live, they can take what the hero of darkness left there. Touka realizes not only the demon lord but also the goddess is evil, so he decides to become a third evil force that will kill the goddess. He checks the skeleton's belongings and finds a forbidden arts book with spells, recipes, and magic tools. He also finds a scroll he can't read and a note that warns about the Soul Eater. He assumes that is what killed everyone in these ruins, but continues exploring. He arrives at a strange door and assumes it is the way out, but he knows the Soul Eater must be close. Touka checks his stats for confidence. He confirms he is level 1229 with nearly 4,000 points in each attribute. He hopes that is enough to face the deadly monster. He looks around and notices a strange wall with a face which he assumes is the Soul Eater. He tries to cast Paralysis, but he is too slow and gets hit on the hand by a beam of light. He is injured and realizes there is a problem with his skill. He must be close, shout the spell's name, and raise his arm toward the target, which leaves him exposed. He considers leveling up more but knows it won't help. The face vomits a strange liquid that turns into slimy human forms. Touka realizes the head is mocking him and showing the dying expressions of people it killed. He understands the monster wants to see how he reacts in despair. The slimes chase him, and the face destroys the wall to watch him suffer. He paralyzes the slimes and thinks about poisoning them, but cannot. He knows they used to be people, and killing them feels like killing humans. The monster laughs and summons more slimes. Touka cries in despair, and the statue enjoys it even more. Suddenly, Touka casts his paralysis skill. The face is shocked, but this was his plan. He knew the monster was arrogant and would lower its guard to enjoy the moment. He never lowered his arm. It was all an act to trick the head. Touka remembers he tried to live as a normal, kind person to honor his foster parents. But in the end, he isn't good. He is just like those who brought him to life. He casts poison and proves he survived the ruins despite having weak skills and stats. The face forces itself to move despite being paralyzed, and Touka learns that this causes additional damage. His poison reaches level 3, and after a while, the head dies. Souls appear to congratulate him for clearing the ruins. In the dark hero tells him to get revenge on Vicious. Touka isn't sure he is good enough for the mission, but he focuses on escaping first. Once outside, Touka notices he is level 1789 and that his stats are low. He checks his level 3 skills. At this level, he can dismiss status effects and even make poison non-lethal to avoid killing random targets. He decides to find a city and thinks he needs a swordsman who can act as a frontline tank while he does the rest. Suddenly, he notices bushes moving and sees slimes bullying a smaller one. He observes the large slimes beating the little one and thinks the monster looks like his past self. But the small one has courage and fights back. Touka admires the slime's resilience and decides to help by testing his poison skills on the others until they run away. He then praises the little slime's fighting spirit and wishes it good luck before leaving. However, the slime refuses to let him go and follows him. Touka finally understands they are both outcasts and takes it in as a companion who can watch his back. He reads his new book and finds a recipe Anglin created to make slimes stronger. He explains his goal to the slime and warns it can leave, but the monster wants to stay by his side. Touka names it Piggy Maru and decides it is time to move. Meanwhile, a group of 4 men chase a girl through the same forest. The girl sees they are getting closer and decides to use her skill Spirit Regalia, which gives her armor. However, the men get lost and run into Touka instead. They want to kill him and steal everything he has before chasing the girl again. They threaten him, and Touka pretends to act like a victim. Suddenly, he uses his paralysis skill. He notices that his skills also work on humans and concludes they only fail on the goddess. He doesn't find humans more intimidating than monsters. He sees these men as trash and kills them with his poison. He loots the bodies but keeps his guard up because he senses someone nearby. Meanwhile, the girl notices the men's presence vanishes. She thinks they are plotting something, but she also feels another unsettling presence. Suddenly, Touka appears and paralyzes her. He explains that he senses hostility from her but only wants answers. He wants to know where he is and what to expect from nearby areas. The girl is worried about the men, but Touka says he killed them. To stay safe, he dismisses his paralysis on her head, allowing her to speak. She thanks him for answering and says she believes he is not lying. She promises to be honest too because, in some way, he is her savior. They agree on a degree of trust but won't pry into each other's lives. Touka learns he is in the country of Ulza instead of Alien. He asks if she can read the scroll he found. The girl reveals it is an ancient script she can't read, but she knows someone who might. She mentions the Witch of Taboos, a woman banished to the land of golden-eyed monsters for her dangerous knowledge. Touka thanks her for the information. The girl feels she still owes him for saving her from the men. Touka says she already returned the favor with her knowledge. He thinks she is too honest, which reminds him of his aunt, who was also too kind. He begins walking away while the girl waits for the paralysis to wear off. Days later, Touka reaches the city of Mills and learns the landlord allows everyone to enter as long as they head to the ruins. He gets a room in an inn and decides to explore the city at night. He gathers intel and returns to his room to plan his actions. His main priority is to find the Witch of Taboos, who can cleanse the scroll of forbidden magic. His second priority is to make the potion that will enhance his slime, but he needs powdered bone from a skeleton king, which exists only in the ruins of the city. The next day, he goes to the mercenary meeting point and sees the city lord announcing they found a new floor in the ruins. The Marquis explains the men can keep the monster materials, but offers 300 gold coins to the one who finds and gives him the Dragon Eye Chalice. Everyone lines up to register, but Touka notices a man harassing a girl, insisting she is Saras Ashrain, the paladin captain from the Holy Empire of Nia. People begin talking about Saras and say she is an elven knight captain with a bounty on her head. The man insists she is an elf and pulls her hood, but she appears human. Touka recognizes her as the girl from the forest. She introduces herself as Mist Balukas, and the man feels ashamed for the scene he caused. Before heading to the dungeon, Touka shops for supplies, but is approached by Mist. They talk briefly and he warns her about the man from before. He also asks for her help in return for cash because he fears being scammed by vendors. Mist agrees since she is broke. They introduce themselves, but Touka uses a fake name, Hati Skull. He points out they are both hiding their real names because they have secrets. They shop together and Touka pays her 3 silvers. She is surprised because it is too much, but he explains she deserves the full amount she saved him. She accepts and tries to leave but suddenly collapses. Touka catches her and notices the bags under her eyes. She claims she hasn't slept well and runs away. Hours later, Touka explores the mill's ruins and sees people fleeing from small minotaurs like the ones in the ruins of Disposal. He paralyzes one, poisons it, and finishes it with a dagger. Other mercenaries are confused because they see only the dagger mark. Touka ignores them and moves on, easily defeating monsters in seconds. After hours, he reaches a room and finds the Dragon Eye Chalice. He notices a gargoyle statue behind it and suspects it is the Guardian. He casts Paralyze and Poison, and the statue reveals itself as a monster. It dies, and Touka takes the chalice, but he senses someone behind him. It is Mist, who admits she wanted to claim the chalice first, but lost time because she had to rest. Touka hands her her the chalice and says he doesn't need it. She doesn't understand why he gives up 300 gold coins and tries to repay him. Touka turns to the altar and explains that his fake hottie persona is too kind toward girls. He never cared about the chalice. His true goal is the monster hidden below. He activates a mechanism that splits the altar and reveals a passage. Mist didn't know there were more floors, but Touka explains the timing of the Marquise's expedition helped him reach his real goal. Mist asks if she can be his bodyguard in exchange for the chalice. Touka accepts but sets rules. They cannot pry into each other's lives, she can leave anytime, and he won't protect her life. She agrees, and they begin fighting monsters together. Touka watches her easily defeat a plant monster and praises her skills. He asks if the eye color of monsters has meaning, especially golden ones. Mist explains golden-eyed monsters give a large amount of experience and are used by heroes to level up. She adds that heroes can only gain experience by killing monsters, not humans. Touka asks about normal-eyed monsters, and Mist says some can even have good relations with humans. She also says the Demon King has an aura that can turn normal monsters into golden-eyed ones, making them violent. Touka remembers a classmate with a golden aura skill and thinks everything golden in this world is ominous. They continue until they reach a room where Mist senses a weak monster nearby. Touka reveals his slime Piggy Maru, and they quickly bond. He thinks the room is a good chance to rest. Mist refuses, but he warns she will collapse mid-battle and tells her to lie down. She finally rests, but Touka casts sleep on her. Her appearance changes and reveals her real form. She is Saris Ashrain, the elf knight captain of Holy Nia that everyone is looking for. She wakes hours later, worried about revealing her identity, but then notices Touka lying nearby. He pretends to wake up, and they continue their exploration until they reach the monster's room. The wall breaks, and Mist is shocked to see a skeleton king. She points to the silver piece below its chin and thinks it could be its weak spot. She also feels worried because this monster is a real threat, even to the strongest group she knows. Before attacking, Mist explains she will activate a power that increases her physical abilities and creates unique armaments. She asks Touka to keep it secret and apologizes because she won't be able to protect him. Touka shocks her by casting Paralyze on the monster, followed by poison. The monster falls quickly and Touka collects the item he needs. He tells Mist he will answer her questions when they return to the surface. They prepare to leave, but Piggy Maru stops them after sensing something inside the monster. Touka checks and finds an egg, which Piggy insists they should keep. They return to the surface and Mist delivers the chalice. She is told the reward will be given the next day. Since they have time, Touka arranges a meeting with her. That night, Mist visits him in his room, and he reveals he wants to hire her as his bodyguard. He explains again that his goal is to reach the land of golden-eyed monsters to find the Witch of Taboos. He knows he will face many monsters and believes he will be safer with a skilled swordsman at his side. Mist explains her goal is to reach the Duchy of Yonato. She thinks it would be convenient to travel through the land of golden-eyed monsters, but she still needs time to think. Touka tells her not to rush and calls her Saras while asking if he can pose a question. She agrees, but remembers she already revealed her true identity. Touka explains he discovered it when he used sleep on her in the ruins. He knows she struggles to team up with people because she reverts to her real form when she sleeps. He says he has no intent to sell her off because he needs her skills. Saras explains she uses the powers of the spirits to hide her identity, but the spell costs her the desire to sleep. She dismisses the spell, shows her true form, and they introduce themselves again with their real names. Touka pays her for her services as a bodyguard with a gem he found in the ruins of Disposal. She is shocked because it is a blue dragon gem, a treasure dropped only from legendary blue-eyed dragons. There is only one gem in circulation, and it is worth far more than 500 gold coins. Touka says it is a fair payment and tells her to keep it. He also says they should use their nicknames, Hattie and Mist, while outside. She agrees but feels she must tell him about her past. She explains she is on the run, but Touka refuses to listen because he doesn't want to know what he shouldn't. He only cares about her skills. She thanks him for being considerate, and they head out for dinner. Touka asks if she has heard of forbidden magic. Saras confirms it and explains it is magic forbidden by the goddess Vicious, which makes Touka believe it is dangerous to her. The next day, Touka experiments with Piggy Maru's enhancement, while Saras goes to claim her reward. However, she doesn't return, and Touka wonders if he misjudged her or if something happened. He walks while thinking about her character until he hears men say she ran into the dark forest after being exposed during the ceremony. He then hears noise above and sees 3 black knights riding dragons to chase Saras. He hurries to find her. Meanwhile, Saras runs from the black knights. She uses her spirit power but is limited to the wind spirit. She defeats some knights but faces the vice captain. She struggles because she needs all her spirits to beat him. She slips and the knight knocks her sword away and pushes her down. He tries to take advantage of her, but Touka casts Paralyze on him. Saras gets up, thanks him for saving her, and wonders what he is doing there. Touka casts poison on the vice captain, makes it non-lethal, and says he came to get her. He then uses sleep on the knight to avoid being overheard. Saras fears Touka will also be pursued by the Black Knights if they keep traveling together. She tries to return the gem and cancel their contract, saying it will cause him more trouble. Touka rejects it because it would be too hard to find another bodyguard as skilled as her. Touka gives Saras new clothes and asks her to change. He says they can ask the Witch of Taboos to shelter her. He believes this is good because no one knows where the witch lives, and he also needs her to read the scroll. Saras does not understand why he risks staying with her, but Touka says her aura reminds him of his aunt. He wakes the guard to ask who wants Saras dead. The knight is about to speak when a huge spear pierces his head. They look up and see 4 knights flying on dragons just out of Touka's range. The man in white calls himself Civet, the strongest man in the world. Saras knows him as the leader of the 5 dragoons. He says Saras's emperor Ortola gave the order to kill her. Saras is shocked to hear this. Civet says the emperor is an old man who hated the thought of her finding a partner, so he ordered her death. Saras does not want to believe it, but she knows it is true. Civet says she is strong and offers a duel. If she wins, she lives. If she loses, she dies. Then he changes his mind and says he wants to fight Touka instead. Touka feels fear because Civet's aura is greater than the Soul Eater's. Civet's men don't know why he is so interested in Touka, but Civet says Touka is grinning in front of them. Touka understands Civet only wants a fight with someone strong. Civet says he once hoped the heroes Vicious called would reach that power, but they are weak and bore him. Touka shocks everyone by saying he is one of the summoned heroes. He says he works alone and is not like the others. He says he will kill Civet one day, but first he needs to grow stronger in the land of golden-eyed monsters with Saras. Civet smiles and agrees, hoping for a duel in the future. He turns to leave, but Touka was waiting for this. As Civet moves, Touka casts Paralyze on them all and follows with poison. The knights die, but Civet resists and almost stands. In the end, even the strongest man in the world cannot hold on. More knights arrive, but Touka fuses with Piggy Maru. In this state, he stretches the slime to get close and casts spells from far away. He uses sleep and raises it to level 3, gaining 3 new skills: Freeze, Blind, and Berserk. He tests them and reaches level 1797. After the fight, Touka thanks Saras for staying with him. He tells her his true goal: he will not stop until he kills the goddess of Alien. Saras kneels and swears loyalty to him because he saved her life. Touka and Saras walk for a few days until they reach a city. Touka buys a mask called the Lord of the Flies. The merchant says it comes from a demon who once defeated many armies. Touka keeps it as a symbol of his revenge against the goddess and the classmates who betrayed him. They explore the city and find a coliseum. Before going in, they get a room and some food. At the restaurant, they hear a group called the Guardians of Ashint. They are cursed god fanatics who claim they killed Civet and the Black Knights. People believe them because they use cursed magic, which looks like Touka's spells. Touka also hears 2 men talking about the Witch of Taboos. They say she is a dark elf who has not been seen for 10 years because she lives in the land of golden-eyed monsters. Rumors say one person has met her. Touka buys the men drinks to learn more. They tell him to meet the Colosseum's strongest warrior. At that moment, the warrior enters the place. She is Eve Speed, a leperman. Touka rushes to her and offers to buy her food in exchange for information. Eve says she has been to the land of golden-eyed monsters but never met the witch. She asks why he seeks her. Touka says he wants to be a scholar and needs an introduction. Sarah stays close, using magic to check if Eve is telling the truth. Eve finishes her meal and leaves after warning him to stay away from that land, because he would not survive. But Saras reveals Eve lied. She has met the Witch of Taboos. Back at the inn, Saras wonders why Touka resists her charms. Touka says revenge is his curse, and it blinds him. Saras kneels and swears to do anything to free him from it. The next day, they learn more about Eve. She was once a fighting slave, and her final match is tomorrow. Touka sees this as a problem because they cannot bribe her. She already has enough money to buy freedom. Saras explains Eve earned it 2 years ago, but saved to buy another slave. The problem is that most final matches end with the fighter's death. Touka believes the Colosseum master planned this and thinks he can use it to make a deal with Eve. Touka ambushes Eve in an alleyway to ask her more questions about the Queen of Taboos. Eve insists that she doesn't know her location, but Touka already knows she is lying. Touka wonders if she is withholding information because she is indebted to the witch, but Eve denies his allegations. Saras points out that she just told another lie, and Eve gets defensive. She demands to know what they are after, and Touka reveals that he wants to help her. Eve feels insulted that Touka thinks she is so weak that she would need his help. Touka explains that she isn't coming out alive from her tournament match the next day because the Duke has planned to eliminate her. Eve wonders why he is offering her help, and he explains he's just making sure he doesn't lose his only lead to the Queen of Taboos. He suggests they help her recover Lys from where she's being and escape Conroy that night. Eve takes this as a threat, and she warns Touka to tread carefully. Touka explains that he wants to help because he is aware of her predicament. They know she has been fighting for over 2 years to rescue Lys, and they want to help her. Eve lowers her defenses because she is certain the duo have good intentions. She thanks them for warning her about the rigged match, but she reveals that she cannot forfeit the tournament because it is the only way to guarantee her freedom and Lys's release. Touka wonders why she didn't accept their offer to help her rescue Lys and escape Conroy. Eve reveals that they will have nowhere to run even if they successfully break Lys out. She explains that she has to play by the rules and gain Lys's freedom the right way, or they'll be fugitives for life, always on the run from Duke Swan. She's certain the Guild of the Colosseum would also place a bounty on their heads, and every mercenary in the continent would always be searching for them. If Eve were alone, she would have been able to live out her life that way, but she can't subject Lys to such a fate. Touka suggests that she escape to the location of the Witch of Taboos. He's certain she would be safe from both the Duke's forces and the mercenaries. Eve reiterates that the heart of the land of monsters is impossible to reach because the journey there is so treacherous that no one would survive it. Touka senses a hint of familiarity in her words, like she has been there before. He suggests they work together to traverse the treacherous terrain. He offers to protect Lys to the best of his ability while Eve leads the way. Eve is skeptical about Touka's abilities because he doesn't amount to much in the sight of plain eyes. She is certain Saris is quite skilled in martial arts, but she's not sure that Touka can offer much protection. Touka reveals that his magic is so potent that he recently took down a skeleton king solo. Eve still isn't convinced that qualifies him as a formidable mage, because there are fiercer monsters in the heart of the land of monsters. Touka then reveals that he was the one who defeated the 5 dragoons. Eve finds it too hard to believe that she assumes he's just spewing lies to convince her. Touka decides to give a demonstration of his power, and he uses a paralysis spell on Eve. Saris also vouches for Touka's ability because she was the one the dragoons were chasing, and he saved her from them. Touka dispels the paralysis spell, but Eve still isn't dissuaded. She insists she would rather fight and win the rigged blood sport match than journey through the heart of the land of monsters with strangers she has just met. That is the only way she is sure she can regain her freedom. She doesn't trust Touka and Saras because she barely knows anything about them, so she decides to put her faith in her own hands. Touka points out that even if she manages to win the match despite the insurmountable odds against her, the Duke may not hold up his end of the bargain. However, Eve still isn't convinced. She admits the Duke is a shady man who sometimes goes against the deals he makes, but she is certain he will hold up his bargain because he never breaks a deal concerning Bloodsport. Touka realizes he can't change Eve's mind, so he turns to leave. However, he informs her they will be leaving the city early the next morning. He invites her to join them at the bridge in front of the gate if she changes her mind. Eve retires to her quarters, but she is having trouble sleeping. Touka's words resonate in her head and brew doubt in her mind. She decides to approach the Duke and confirm her freedom if she wins the match the next day. She reaches his quarters and hears him talking to the guild branch leader about her match, so she eavesdrops. The branch leader confirms their plan to kill her during the match after sneaking a paralytic into her drink. He has had enough of an animal being glorified as the Bloodsport champion for 3 years now. The branch guild master remembers that Lys is the reason Eve has continued fighting for so long. He wonders if he will grant Lys her freedom to honor Eve's memory when they succeed with their ploy, but the Duke reveals that he would never do that. Instead, he would take her in and allow her to grow up so he could play with her for a while, before selling her to a brothel. The guildmaster is surprised that the Duke won't even respect Eve's wishes in her death, and the Duke feels insulted because subhuman animals don't deserve respect. After hearing all this, Eve realizes she has no choice but to rescue Lys. She walks down the hallway to return to her room, but Muaji calls out to her to express his enthusiasm for her match tomorrow. Ashant soldiers suddenly surround him to inform him of some trouble brewing in the city. Eve walks away and heads for the bridge. Touka is surprised she came so early. Eve admits that she has changed her mind now because she found out that everything Touka said was true. She offers to reveal the location of the Witch of Taboos if he helps her break Lys out of the tavern. Touka immediately agrees, so they make for the tavern. The tavern owner scolds Lys for chasing her customers away, and Lys apologizes. Eve suddenly bursts into the tavern. She is put off by the deplorable conditions to which Lys is subjected. She declares she is taking Lys back into her custody. She approaches the tavern owner to punish her for the harsh treatment meted out to Lys, but the owner begs for mercy because she was only acting on the Duke's orders. She promises to keep their departure a secret, so Eve decides to spare her. Eve informs Lys that they will be embarking on a dangerous journey. She wonders if the little girl is still willing to stick with her, and Lys insists that she will follow her anywhere she goes as long as they can remain together. They turn to leave, but Touka is standing at the entrance, which scares Lys. Touka apologizes for scaring her and orders Eve to leave with Lys while he handles some personal business. He approaches the tavern owner and reveals that her mediocre, melodramatic performance didn't fool him. The tavern owner drops the charade and mocks Touka because the Duke will hunt them down and string them up like animals. She demands he pleads with her so she doesn't send the Duke after them, but Touka assures her that she won't be able to do anything when he's done with her. He uses his paralysis and poison spell on her to immobilize her and brings out a knife to make her look like the victim of a robbery. After Touka is done with her, he meets up with the others inside a tunnel. They escape the city through the tunnel into a forest. Eve is curious about Touka's desperate need for the location of the Witch of Taboos. Touka explains that he has a scroll of forbidden magic and needs her help to decipher it. Eve assumed he wanted to harm her, but she is at ease now that she's sure he has good intentions. She swears loyalty to him because he has proven to be trustworthy. She points out that he could have used several underhanded methods to obtain the needed information, but he chose to do things without harming anyone, which makes him better than most people she has met in her life. Touka reminds her that she said she can't trust people she just met, but she has now learned that trust can be earned in a small amount of time. They mount their horses, but Saris is apprehensive about allowing someone as young as Lys into the land of monsters. Touka promises to protect them until they reach the Witch of Taboos. He also has another reason for allowing them to tag along to the land of the monsters. He is certain that Eve has some connection to the Witch of Taboos, and she could introduce them to her as acquaintances. There are rumors that the witch is also a dark elf, just like Lys. Since they have saved someone from her race, it should soften the tension and make their interactions easier. Saris is impressed by Touka's foresight and how much he has everything planned out. Touka admits he did everything for their self-interest, but he is glad that the outcome will give Eve and Lys a better life. They ride up a hill and look back at the city to see groups of soldiers already scouring the forest in search of them. Touka is surprised they have already gotten wind of their escape so soon, but Eve figures out it was likely the work of Muaji. Touka recognizes him as the leader of the Ashant cult. Eve apologizes that her carelessness endangered them. To compensate for her mistakes, she asks Touka to take Lys while she holds off their pursuers. However, Touka won't allow her to throw away her life so easily. He is certain she won't be able to handle them alone, even if she is a recurring Bloodsport champion. He also points out that she is their guide to the Witch of Taboos, so they need her to lead them on their journey. Eve wonders what alternative they have, and Touka suggests they defeat the soldiers by baiting them into a trap. They attach torches to the horses and set them loose while they hide in the forest. Saras informs him that the first wave of soldiers followed the horses, but he asks if any Ashant followed them. Saras answers that she didn't see anything. Eve speculates that the first wave was probably the Duke's soldiers, while the other wave consists of Ashant. Touka orders Eve to take Lys and hide somewhere up ahead in the forest, but she insists on fighting with him. He denies her request because he needs someone to protect Lys while he carries out his plan with Saras. Eve gives in and agrees to take Lys to a safe spot. Touka is apprehensive of Muaji's strategic ingenuity. He is surprised he was smart enough to discern his plan with the little information at his disposal. He gives Saras some instructions to carry out while he carries out his mission, but Eve is curious about his plan to defeat the numerous soldiers chasing them. He admits that he can't beat them head-on, so he plans to switch up the battlefield and drag them out to an unfamiliar territory where he can take them out easily. He puts on his helmet as he prepares to execute his plan. Muaji tracks them down and orders them to step out of hiding. Saras steps out and Muaji inquires about the location of Eve and Touka. Saras refuses to give them up, and Muaji threatens to curse her with endless suffering so that she begs for the mercy of death. He points out that his curses are so strong that he used them to defeat the 5 dragoons. Saras knows he's lying, but she keeps that a secret. She makes Muaji swear to guarantee Eve and Lys's safety before she reveals their location. Muaji agrees, so she decides to lead him to them. She asks the soldiers to follow her, but Muaji stops them because something smells fishy. He's suspicious that Saras is leading them to another trap. He figured this out because she wants all his soldiers to follow her into the woods, where they will be in range of the surprise attack. He orders his soldiers to arm their bows and prepare to fire. Saras reminds him he swore to curse her, not kill her with an arrow. Muaji informs her that his soldiers are assassins who also use curse magic. He points out that their arrow tips are laced with poison capable of cursing anyone struck by them. This poison is so advanced that it can only be synthesized by the survivors of the original assassin guild that his soldiers are emulating. He explains that they exploited the uncertainty of the death of the dragoon to make people terrified of the potency of the curses. Since curses leave no trace and there was no proof of what killed the dragoons, Muaji saw it as the perfect opportunity to execute some psyops. Saras wonders what his endgame is, and he explains that he is manipulating Duke Zwan to carve out a central role for his cult in the nation. He plans to eliminate everyone who gets in his way and eventually take control of the city. Muaji is done daydreaming. He asks her about her companions, and she tells him that besides Lys and Eve, she is alone. Muaji finds that hard to believe because there's no way she could take them down on her own. Saras removes her helmet and reveals that she's no ordinary swordsman, but the person who survived the 5 dragoons. Muaji recognizes her as the infamous swordsman, but he's curious if she is the one who slew the dragoon. Saras wonders why he is questioning her abilities, and he expresses his disbelief because she isn't strong enough to take down humanity's strongest knights. He snaps his fingers and Belgar steps forward. He introduces him as the man who would have been Eve's final opponent. He also indicates that Vergen is Bulgar's brother, and they are the strongest siblings in the Ashant. He reveals that their younger brother was Zarash, and they have come to avenge his death. He informs her that she is surrounded, so she has 2 options. Either bend a knee and swear allegiance to him, or oppose them and face the wrath of the followers of the Curse God. Saras immediately bends the knee, and Muaji accepts her pledge of allegiance. However, this was just the signal for Touka to attack. Touka blinds the cult with a huge flare and uses his curse of paralysis. He walks up to Muaji and reveals that he already took down the other detachment of Ashant soldiers. Touka uses poison on them, as he commends Muaji for detecting that something was amiss. However, he reveals that they were playing along with his game like puppets on a marionette. He explains that he intentionally broke the branch, and asks Saras to try to lead them into the forest so they would become paranoid and refuse to follow her. Muaji and his cult succumb to the poison, and Saras praises Touka for executing his plan flawlessly. Touka points out that she was the key element that made the plan so effective, so he thanks her for playing her role perfectly. He tasks her with updating Eve about how their plan is going. He observes the first wave of soldiers return to continue scouring the forest for them. He asks Piggymaru to connect with him so he can execute the final part of the plan, but Piggymaru protests because he is exhausted. Saras returns with Eve and Lys. Eve offers Touka her services to conclude his plans, so he tasks Saras with looking after after Lys. Ceres takes Lys to safety, so they proceed with the plan. Eve stands on the path of the knights as bait, and they immediately rush in to attack her. But Touka uses his paralysis and poison combo to eliminate them. Duke Zwan approaches them from behind on his horse. Costello and another group of knights ride along with him. Costello goes in for Eve, and Touka tries to use his paralysis, but the system informs him that he has maxed out his target. He decides to use his dark spell to blind Costello while Eve takes his head off. Touka also uses the dark spell on some other knights, and Eve executes them one by one. The other knights turn to run away, but Touka instructs Eve not to allow any of them to survive, so she hunts them down. The remaining knight begs for mercy, but Duke Zwan has had enough of the wussies. He uses a knight as an example to those who want to run away. He orders them to take Touka down. Eve thanks Touka for the opportunity to feel the thrill of battle again. Previously, she was bored with battles despite being a warrior, but now her love for the game has been rekindled after fighting alongside Touka. She lets out a primal howl as she chases down the remaining knights, trying to run. She takes them out one after the other and stands face to face with the Duke. The Duke promises to get his revenge for her treasonous act another day. However, Touka paralyzes him before he can retreat. He offers him up to Eve, and she punishes him for threatening Lys. Now that all the knights are taken care of, Touka instructs Ceres to prepare for departure with the help of Lys. Touka freezes the corpses of the Ascent members and turns them into powder to eliminate the proof of their existence. The report reaches Gin, and he is surprised that the Ascent were eliminated without a trace. He is pissed that he can't use them as pawns in his grand scheme anymore. He is also scared of souring the goddess's mood when she hears the news. He orders his soldiers to search everywhere and find the Ascent warriors. Touka and the traveling party take a break in a cave. After dinner, Ceres offers to take first watch while the others sleep. Since she can't sleep, Touka also admits that he can't sleep, so he decides to take the first watch, but Ceres refuses. Since neither of them can sleep, they decide to engage in conversation. She asks if Touka has any special feelings for Eve or Lys, because he is as gentle with them as he is with her. Touka reveals that Eve reminds him of his uncle. Although their gender and mannerisms differ, they both possess a warrior's heart. His uncle and aunt are the only reasons why he wants to return to his world. He sympathizes with Lys because they were both in the same situation. Touka was also abused as a child just like Lys, but unlike him, Lys never let those things get to her. Meanwhile, Touka is now completely hostile. He is not a hero or a savior. His only mission is to enact his selfish revenge on all those who wrong him for any reason. Touka realizes he is not a good person, and Saras is just blindly following him as he carries out his vendetta. He offers Saras an out so she can follow her convictions and chase her dreams. Ceres insists that she is not going anywhere because she has her vendetta against Alien's goddess. She has no intentions of leaving Touka now that he has also appointed her as the vice captain of their makeshift team. Touka decides to grant her one important wish, and he advises her to take time to think of what she wants. Ceres thanks him, and she settles in for the night. He uses a sleep spell to put her to sleep. Meanwhile, Ayaka and Nyantan continue their secret training in the dungeons. They finish a training session, and Nyantan commends Ayaka's progress in mastering her technique. She is certain Ayaka will surpass her skills in no time. She reminds her to keep their meeting a secret because it would be difficult to get permission to continue if Vicious discovers their activities. Ayaka appreciates her commendation and promises to keep their training a secret. Ayaka wonders why Nyantan chose to help her, and Nyantan reveals that she couldn't help it because she looks just like her sister. She cautions Ayaka to be careful. She advises her to become a predator without showing any weakness or risk becoming prey in a world with no remorse. She warns her to remember that piece of advice always, and she leaves the dungeon. The next morning, Touka goes shopping and gets new clothes for Lys so she can better fit in with them. She put it on and thanked him for his kind gesture. Saras suggests they name their mercenary band because they may need a name to identify themselves while in the land of the monsters. She suggests they name themselves the Lord of the Flies Warband to indicate that they are a band of mercenaries being led by the Lord of the Flies. Eve and Lys like the name, so Touka decides to adopt it. They continue their journey and finally arrive at a plateau overlooking the land of monsters. He spots a corrupted tree, and Eve explains that it was once a sacred tree. She asks him to pour some magic into her hands, and he obliges. She uses an ancient technique to summon a map on her hand that indicates the direction to the Witch of Taboos. A monster's roar echoes from the land of monsters, which startles the group. They decide to rest for a while before continuing their journey. Later that day, Touka is unsettled. He was hoping time would quell his thirst for vengeance against the goddess Vicious, but his burning desire for revenge has not been quenched at all. He wants to get her back for describing him as a disgraceful fool who won't amount to anything. He plans to amass a lot of experience points and learn new skills while traveling through the land of golden-eyed monsters. Though he knows he may never catch up to the S-Class and A-Class heroes, the experience gained will close the gap considerably. He plans to annihilate every monster in the land of monsters till the land is bare and barren. Then he would show the goddess that he's worth something. Meanwhile, Goddess Vicious commends the heroes for leveling up, but she points out that only leveling up is not enough because that merely increases their base skills. She wants them to learn new skills and techniques, so she made arrangements with famous figures from every nation to train them. She informs them that the Great Demon Empire forces are making a move, and they may likely face them in battle soon. She announces that the adventurers will be joining the forces of Aelion to repel the demon forces if that happens. After the speech, she walks down a hallway hallway with Nyantan. She reveals that she plans to send the heroes to the land of golden-eyed monsters because she needs them to level up and learn new skills. Touka and his band of mercenaries get ready to venture into the land of the golden-eyed monsters. Liz offers to be their backpack carrier, but they are worried that the weight of the luggage would overwhelm her. She assures them she would be fine and also points out that she has an increased chance of survival, since the others are more likely to protect her better if they have fewer hindrances. The others decide to let her have her wish, but Touka urges her to ask for assistance if she ever needs any. He tasks Piggymaru with watching the surroundings, and they begin their journey. Touka takes inventory of the resources available to them, but a monster's screech startles them. Eve draws her sword as the bushes around them rustle and a huge monster emerges. Touka notes that it is similar to a monster lizard he fought previously, but unlike that one, this one has a seaweed head. The seaweed lizard attacks Eve, but she manages to dodge the first strike. It follows up with a tail whip, and Eve blocks it. Touka uses his paralysis spell to immobilize the monster, uses the poison spell to curse it, and then uses sleep to knock it out. This was part of Touka's plans to test out his spells, because he wasn't certain they would work on monsters. He expresses his disappointment at how inferior the monsters in the land are compared to the monsters in the ruins of Disposal. He's confident they will be able to blitz through the land of monsters if all the other monsters are in the same category as the seaweed lizard. He unsheathes his knife and cuts out the seaweed head of the lizard. Saris is curious about what he plans to use it to do, and he shows her a book of ingredients. He explains that the seaweed head can be used to craft a forbidden item. He leaves the book with Saras because she was so interested in the crafts. Now that Touka is certain of the kind of heroes they will encounter, he is eager to begin the journey. They enter the forest and Eve senses a foreign presence. She orders Liz to turn back and informs Touka that some monsters have discovered their location. Touka steps up, and Eve reveals that these monsters are the reason she fled the land of monsters. They were so powerful that she was powerless against them. Touka orders her to stand back with the others while he faces the monsters. The monster bugs run at Touka, and he feels thrilled to be taking on monsters that the greatest Bloodsport champion stood no chance against. The monsters get into Touka's range, and he recognizes them from a previous encounter. He immediately uses the paralysis spell and follows up with the berserk spell that causes the monster's insides to explode. Touka levels up after defeating the monsters, but Eve is curious about his monster catalog knowledge. Touka reveals that they are Nazorts as he cuts out the useful part of their paw. Eve assumes that he wants to chop them up and make some barbecue, but Saris explains that he will be using them as ingredients to enhance Piggymaru. Piggymaru isn't pleased with what he is about to be forced to consume, but Touka assures him it will turn out better when he is done preparing it.
Probably.
He senses a monster for a split second, but then loses its presence. He asks Eve if she sensed anything, and she reveals that she sensed a monster for a second, but it's gone. He orders Saris to sniff out the monster, but she can't, because her spirits aren't responding. She is also certain that a monster is close by, so they all put up their guard. Touka is puzzled by the absence of malice and hostility from the monster, which makes it hard for him to pinpoint its location. Piggymaru reveals that the monster is inside Touka's backpack. Touka sets his backpack down and brings out a red glowing egg. He sets the egg on the ground and it hatches. A pony springs out of the egg and doubles in size immediately. Touka notices this weird transformation, so he asks Eve for an explanation, but she comes up short. Saris also admits that she doesn't know if the pony is a real monster or not, because she has never seen anything like it before. The pony approaches Touka and Saris is tense. She calls out to him to be cautious, but Touka is certain the pony won't hurt him. The pony gently rubs its head against Touka's hands, and Touka confirms that it has no hostility towards them. Touka pets the pony, but he feels a bump on its back. Saris explains that the bump is an organ that allows a magical monster to absorb magic. Touka figures out that the pony absorbed the magic in the area after it hatched and increased in size. He orders everyone to get back while he infuses the pony with his magic. He fills the orb with his magic power, and the pony transforms into a stallion. Everyone is amazed by the horse's magnificence, but it sits again, and Touka figures out that the horse wants him to infuse it with more magic. He channels more magic power into the horse, and it transforms into a majestic centaur with 8 legs. Touka recognizes the horse as Sleipnir, the divine beast Odin once rode. He orders Slay to return to his original form to reduce the inconvenience of traversing the forest. Meanwhile, the heroes are progressing through the forest at a snail's pace. They work as a group to eliminate the monsters and share the experience equally, so everyone levels up at the same pace. Shugo notices Takuto looking down in the dumps. He confronts him about it, and Takuto is pissed that the top fighter underestimates his abilities by only sending weak monsters his way. He plans to show them his true capabilities and put them in their place. The top fighters continue exploring the forest, but they sense high-level monsters ahead of them. They figure the monsters would be too much for the heroes to handle, so they ask them to stand back while they handle it. Nazorts emerge from the forest and run at the group. Nyantan offers to handle the one at the forefront, while Agido handles the one at the rear. Nyantan explains that the monsters are too strong, so they have to take them out without waiting for the heroes to share the experience points. Agido invites Abyss to lend them a hand, and they get to work. They make quick work of the monsters by slicing them to bits, but dozens more emerge from the forest. Takuto has had enough of the top fighters bossing him around. He walks up as Agido notices that the Nazorts are changing course and attacking the weaker heroes. Takuto stands up to the horde of Nazorts, and he casts his unique Dragonic Flame skill. Flames emerge from his hands and morph into dragons, before crashing into the Nazort horde and engulfing them in flames. Takuto stands triumphantly over the ashes of the Nazorts, commanding the crowd to bear witness to his greatness. Everyone is impressed, but Kobato notices that Hijiri and Itsuki are missing. The flame wall catches the attention of Hijiri and Itsuki in another part of the forest. They decide to rejoin the group since their scout mission didn't yield any dividends. The hostages they captured took their own lives, so they wouldn't get tortured and give out any information. They figure out that they were probably spies, but they don't know which country they are allied with. Hijiri theorizes that the goddess Vicious sent the spies to harm them while they are in the land of the golden-eyed monsters. In another part of the forest, Touka and his band of mercenaries settle in for the night in a tower. Touka observes the wall of flames from a distance before Ceres informs him that she has made dinner. Ceres is impressed at how much ground Slay has helped them cover. Touka also commends him because they are now very close to the Witch of Taboos. Ceres wonders what Touka is staring at, and he reveals that he saw a strange light in the distance. He assumed that it was from two monsters fighting each other, but Ceres points out that the flames emerged in the northeastern direction of the forest. Touka realizes that this is the direction of Aelion, where the goddess Vicious lives. They turn in for the night, but when they wake up, Ceres notices that Touka is missing. She wakes Eve up and asks about his whereabouts because she is scared he may be in danger. Eve reassures her that Touka is fine. They walk out of the tower to see Touka sitting on the field, surrounded by the corpse of a monster and purple goo. Eve recognizes the monster as the human-faced beast, and she wonders how Touka was able to take one down, all by himself. Touka reveals that the monster wasn't particularly troublesome to bring down. Ceres knows this is just an average Tuesday for Touka, but she hopes that he doesn't shoulder too much responsibility and gets crushed by it. They continue their journey, but after a while they come across a path blocked by cliffs. They decide to follow a path around the cliffs, but Ceres suggests that he get some rest. Touka reveals that they can't stop because it's quite cloudy and they need to make as much progress as possible before the rain hits. They continue moving along the cliffs, and Eve points out that she doesn't sense any monsters over a large radius. Ceres speculates that their proximity to the Witch of Taboos may be the reason for the absence of monsters. Touka wonders how Lys is holding up, and she admits that she was scared of the monsters but found solace in his presence. She explains that Ceres assured her that no harm would come to her as long as Touka is with them, so she is certain she is safe. Touka realizes that Lys, Ceres, and Eve have complete faith in his abilities, and he doesn't plan to betray their faith. They finally reach a pathway through the cliffs. Eve reveals that if they get through the path, they will be close to the witch. Eve thanks them for helping her rescue Lys and for accompanying them through the forest while ensuring their safety. Touka waves off her thanks because they would have been lost without her compass. He isn't expecting any favor from her because they are even. Eve is just grateful she gets to live a life of peace away from the Bloodsport tournament. Her motivation to win the tournament and gain Lys's freedom was so they could one day build a little house and have a nice farm. At some point, it felt like that dream would never be a reality, but thanks to Touka, her dreams will soon come true. Suddenly, a huge clamp monster lunges at them. Touka is caught off guard by this sudden attack, but Eve's battle reflexes take over. She draws her sword and kills the monster with one swift slash. Touka is skeptical that the monster is dead, so he uses his paralysis skill to check, and it reveals that it is dead. However, something doesn't feel right about the way the monster suddenly showed up, which makes Touka uneasy. The monster glows mysteriously and releases a terrifying screech and a flare simultaneously. The ground begins to rumble, and Touka finally understands that the monster was acting as a forerunner to attract the other monsters in the forest to anyone who kills it. All the monsters in the forest head towards the direction of the clamp's dying call, and Touka's heart skips a few beats. The monsters are so many that he isn't sure any of them will survive the attack. Ceres wonders what they will do about the approaching horde. Touka tries to create an escape plan before the horde collapses on them, but Eve steps forward. She offers to act as bait so the others can escape while the monsters are distracted. Lys doesn't like this decision, but Eve explains that she is trying to compensate for her foolish action that put them in danger. She assures Lys she will be fine because she is in her natural habitat and will be able to find her way around quite easily. She makes Lys promise to always listen to Touka and Saras and be well behaved until she returns. Touka agrees to her request on the condition that she returns to them alive. Eve promises she will return alive, but Touka is disappointed in Eve for thinking that he would allow her to act as bait while he runs away. He reveals that he can't allow her to carry on with her plan because her odds of survival are too low. He also urges her to stop beating herself up for slaying the clamp monster because she had no choice. He admits that he is also to blame because he was slow to react, but Eve thinks he's just trying to make her feel better. Touka reveals that Eve is indispensable because the witch blessed her race with a map that leads to her. He is also certain she will ease their negotiations because the witch will feel more comfortable around a familiar face. He fits his voice projection device on his mask, and he reveals that he has the best chance of survival against the monsters with Slay and Piggy Maru to hack him up. Since his spells are guaranteed to be lethal against the monster, Touka concludes the best course of action is for him to stay back while the others continue towards the witch's location. Ceres wishes him good luck, and he puts her in charge of the band in his absence. In another part of the forest, the heroes are put in a panic by the monster stampede. The top fighters direct the other heroes to retreat so they don't become collateral damage. However, the heroes are so scared that they scramble in different directions for safety. Shugo and Takuto do their best to fend off some of the monsters to give the other heroes a chance to escape. Takuto is puzzled because the monsters seem to have a different objective besides attacking them, which is unusual. A monster corners Kanai, and Kobato rushes to her aid, but she gets knocked down. Kanai thanks Kobato for distracting the monster, and she uses the opportunity to escape, leaving Kobato to face the beast alone. Meanwhile, Touka is riding out to meet the monsters head-on. He left the others at a cave where he was certain they would be safe. He infuses Slay with more magic, and he transforms into his full form. He finds a good spot, and he asks Piggymaru to signal the start of the battle through his amplified mask. The monsters run at him, and Touka rides off on Slay. The monsters chase after him, and he wonders how long he can evade them till they catch up. He apologizes to Slay and Piggymaru for putting them in harm's way for the sake of others, but they're indifferent. Touka realizes he has their full support, and he is eager to engage in an all-out war with the monsters. Meanwhile, the heroes have suffered some casualties. Ayaka meets up with Yasu, who was supposed to be in charge of the fallen heroes. She wonders why he did nothing to protect them since they were part of his group. Yasu reveals that his safety should take priority over that of the normal heroes, because he is a top fighter. He blames the heroes for being so slow and weak that they couldn't escape the monsters. Ayaka is surprised by Yasu's attitude. She reminds him that he is an A-class hero, and it falls on him to protect his weak classmates from the monsters they can't handle. Yasu has had enough of Ayaka's self-righteousness. He orders her to shut up and come off her high horse because she is not better than him. He scolds her for lecturing him in such a condescending tone, but Ayaka doesn't understand what he is talking about. He is pissed that she thinks she can tell others how to live their lives just because she is a noble, but Ayaka clarifies that she wanted to understand why he didn't protect his subordinates. Yasu explains that the heroes died because they were too weak, and he survived because he was strong enough to fend off the monsters. Ayaka reminds him that it is the duty of the strong to protect, but Yasu goes off again because she is acting like a saint while looking down on others. He points out that she knows nothing about duty because everything she has ever achieved in life has been handed to her on a platter. He explains that the deceased heroes got what they deserved because they were jerks who kept mocking him behind his back. He doesn't feel a morsel of remorse for their demise. Shugo and Takuto walk in on Yasu while he's throwing a temper tantrum. Takuto is disappointed that Yasu's true nature has been revealed, and he has no sense of morality or obligation. He draws his sword and mocks Yasu because he was given a title he wasn't worthy of. Takuto reveals that only nobles like him should be worthy of such an honor, and commoners like Yasu should have no right to stand beside him. Yasu can't take it anymore. He snaps and invokes his aura, but Shugo wonders why he wants to attack them instead of saving his strength for the monsters. Yasu ignores him and warns Takuto to tread carefully. He warns him not to get lost in his title as an S-rank hero because, though he is just an A rank, he doesn't have a problem demonstrating his power and putting him in his place. Shugo tries to intervene, but Takuto orders him to back off. Yasu walks away, but Takuto won't take such disrespect. He silently promises to show off the extent of his abilities, so simpletons like Yasu can grasp the stack difference in their strengths. Inside the cave, Eve contemplates going out to help Touka because the monsters are too many for him to handle. She also points out that he isn't in the most optimal of states because he has barely gotten any sleep since they entered the land of monsters. She reiterates that she is better suited to the terrain compared to Touka because she has night vision and excellent hearing. She also points out that she is the only one who can carry Touka or Slay if they get injured. Ceres is aware of her abilities, and she acknowledges that she could be of great help to Touka, so she agrees to let her track him down. Ceres makes Eve promise to return alive and entrusts her with Lisa's safety. She leaves the cave and heads out to meet Touka. Touka is still leading the horde of monsters after him. He figures out that his attacks are bound to land because the monsters are so many that they take up all the space around him. He spreads out Piggymaru and uses Berserk to infect the monsters. They scramble for a while and attack themselves. However, they regain composure and focus on Touka. He uses paralysis on the monsters, but it barely does enough to give him a chance to escape. The human-faced monsters leading the stampede have also adapted to his tentacle attacks, so he can't rely on that anymore. It starts raining and Touka's visibility is reduced. He also can't track the monsters behind him using sounds anymore because the pattering of rain interferes. He pulls up his status to check how much he has expended. He does some quick calculations and concludes that he can't continue with his strategy for much longer unless he levels up. He figures out that the human-faced monsters will be worth a truckload of XP, so he decides to keep taking them down as they get closer so he can upgrade his stats. However, he realizes that allowing them to get into close range will be too risky because they could hurt him. Long-range attacks are also not an option because he won't be close enough to collect the XP from the slain monster. He decides the best course of action is to turn around and go back the way he came. Touka turns Slay around, and the monsters try to change course to keep chasing him. He leverages this moment of hesitation to cast his dark spell, which blinds the monsters. He follows up with his paralysis and berserk spells to immobilize the monsters until he gets back into range to get the XP drops. His MP is draining so fast that it's almost empty, but he finally gets into range and uses another berserk spell to finish off the monsters. He levels up and his MP is restored. He immediately spreads out Piggymaru to channel his paralysis, and berserk spell casts over a wider range. But the monsters are so many that they continue chasing him down. Two huge monsters are too close to him that he can feel them breathing down his neck. He contemplates using an ailment spell on them, but he has to look them in the eye for the spell to be effective. With the reduced visibility, that is next to impossible. He continues galloping on Slay, and the monsters keep chasing after him. He hops off and uses Slay as a decoy. The monsters run past him, and he uses his paralysis spell to immobilize them. He follows up with his berserk spell to blow up their inside and receive the XP drop. He levels up again and his MP is restored. He mounts Slay again and continues running from the other monsters, who have now caught up to him. He uses his dark and paralysis spells to immobilize them, and things seem to be going according to plan. However, he misjudges the number of monsters rushing at him and casts the wrong spell. He tries to correct his mistake, but he can't react fast enough. The monsters crash into Slay and Touka gets thrown off. He gets back to his feet, but the monsters close in on him, and he has no route of escape. He channels his spells through Piggymaru and casts his dark and paralysis spells to prevent the monsters from closing in, but he can barely keep up with the numbers. He remembers that the others are relying on him to return, so he doesn't falter. He keeps leveling up as he takes down the monsters, and he eventually takes down all the monsters surrounding him. Meanwhile, Kabato is lost in the forest. She ran off to hide and protect herself when the monsters attacked, but she lost her sense of direction. Now she has no idea how to get back with the other heroes. She hears some noise and she looks up to see Eve. Eve wonders what a little girl is doing alone in the land of the monsters. She walks up to check on the girl and notices that she has striking similarities with Lise. She tries to pick her up, but Itsuki emerges from and attacks her with her sword, infused with a level 1 lightning spell. Eve manages to react fast enough to block it, and Itsuki can't believe her reflexes were fast enough to counter her. She dials up her lightning spell to level 2 to immobilize Eve. Eve recognizes her as one of the heroes Touka cautioned her against. She tries to speak and explain that she means Kabato no harm, but her vocal cords are unresponsive. Itsuki infuses her sword with lightning again and attacks her. Eve somehow manages to dodge Itsuki's strikes. Itsuki can believe how tenacious Eve is. No one has ever been able to stand after taking one of her lightning attacks, but Eve can still move freely after being hit by 2. She strikes Eve persistently, but Eve evades and blocks as if she weren't struck by lightning at all. Itsuki keeps backing Eve up with her attacks, and she finds an opening to strike. She goes in for the kill, but Hijiri calls out to her because she has been searching everywhere for her. Itsuki backs up and wonders why she interrupted her, and Hijiri explains that Eve isn't a demon because she doesn't give off the same impression as the other monsters they fought. She points out that Eve is intelligent and carries herself like a human, which means they can communicate with her. Itsuki doubts Hijiri's claims are true, but Hijiri points out that her attack disabled Eve's voice. Itsuki realizes she screwed up, but Hijiri apologizes to Eve on her behalf. Itsuki also apologizes because she tends to leap into action impulsively whenever her sister isn't around to limit her. They communicate with Eve through gestures, and she expresses no ill intent towards them. They decide to part ways with her without further hurting anyone. Hijiri introduces herself to Eve out of courtesy before she goes. She reveals that they are humans from another world. She also reveals that she knows Eve because she heard a leopardman, who was the Bloodsport champion, mysteriously went missing. She figures out that Eve is searching for someone because she can't be traveling through the forest alone. She also figures out that the person she is looking for is the one dealing with the monster stampede. She concludes that the person she is looking for is strong enough to take care of human-faced monsters all by himself. Eve admits that her insight is impressive, but she points out that Touka's abilities aren't so easy to gauge. She leaves the trio behind and continues her search for Touka. Touka is still trying to take down the monsters in the stampede. He repeatedly uses his berserk spell to take down the monsters surrounding him. A monster elephant runs at him, but he uses his sleep spell to immobilize it just before it crushes him. He follows up with a poison attack to defeat the attack. He checks his stat and observes that he still has a lot of MP to continue fighting, but Piggymaru is exhausted. He reduces him to his ordinary form and he takes off his helmet. He is hurt by the fall, but he is encouraged because he has been able to hold his own so far. He pulls his stats and he's impressed by how much he has leveled up, but leveling up doesn't heal his wounds. He feels weak from pushing his body past its limit to take down the monsters and level up. However, there's still one more monster stalking him from the forest trees. The monster has figured out that Touka's skills can only work if the target is in his line of sight. The monster attacks him from his blind spot, but he senses it and turns around to charge it down. He tries casting his spell, but the monster hides behind some trees, and then casts a magic turret upwards, which fires magic bullets at Touka. Touka tries to control Slay to dodge the shots, but he gets grazed by one bullet. A bullet hits Slay on the leg, and he falls over, tossing Touka to the ground. Touka calls out Piggymaru and asks him for one last favor. The monster conjures the magic turret again to shoot magic shots at Touka, who dodges the attack and uses the debris as cover to set up Piggymaru as bait. The monster predicts that Touka would attack him from behind, so he turns around to block reflexively, but it's just Slay behind him. Touka attacks from above to get a clear vision of the monster, and he uses his Paralysis and Berserk combo to finish it off. He crumbles to his knees and pulls up his stats to see that he is in critical condition. He looks back at the chaos he left in his wake and absorbs all the XP drops from the monsters. His Paralysis skill levels up, and he obtains a new advanced skill. He decides to head back to their hideout, but his legs are too weak to stand. Suddenly, an opportunistic wolf monster lunges at him, and he can barely put his hand up to cast his Paralysis spell. But he doesn't have to, because Eve slices the monster perfectly in two. She carries Touka, Slay, and Piggymaru back to the hideout, but she informs Touka that she stumbled into some heroes on her way to him. She lists their names, and Touka recognizes them, but he wonders if she gave up his identity to them. She reveals that she was cautious enough to avoid giving out his info, because she didn't know the kind of relationship he had with them. They reach the hideout, and Saras and Liz are happy that everyone came back alive. Touka asks Saras to tend to Piggymaru. She tends to Touka as it gets dark, and Eve offers to take first watch. Saras sews Touka's clothes while he tucks in for the night, but he is too on edge to sleep. Saras offers him a more comfortable spot, and she advises him not to bear the responsibility of their safety alone. She asks him to always come to her if he feels overwhelmed. Touka teases her for acting like an overprotective elder sister, but he appreciates how much she cares about him. Touka finally falls asleep, but he wakes up after some time because he feels some disturbance around him. He calls out to Saras because he can perceive she hasn't gotten any sleep. He offers to use his skill to put her to sleep, and she gladly accepts. Touka puts her to sleep, and it dawns on him that he is so comfortable around Saras now that he can let himself be vulnerable around her without fear of betrayal. Meanwhile, the Takao sisters and Kabato try to navigate the forest and reunite with the rest of the heroes. Kabato thanks Itsuki for coming to her aid, but Itsuki doesn't think it's a big deal. She was only doing her duty as a friend. Itsuki questions her choice to team up with Asagi because they have nothing in common. She assumed Kabato would pair up with the class president because they have more similarities. Kabato explains that Asagi helped her to pass the group test because she was too scared to put down an innocent pigeon. Asagi then forced her to team up with them so she could keep exploiting her. Itsuki points out that she may have signed a deal with the devil because there's more to Asagi than meets the eye. Kabato reveals that she is counting on Asagi having an unpredictable side, because it could be what ends up saving Ayaka if she's ever in danger. They continue walking in silence until they rejoin the other heroes. Asagi welcomes Kabato, but she wonders why she is hanging out with the Takao sisters. Kabato informs her that the sisters helped her retrace her steps back to the group. Asagi commends the sisters for their kindness and decides to inform the four saints that Kobato has returned so they can stop searching for her. As Asagi leaves, Hijiri speculates to Itsuki that the assassins they saw were sent to eliminate members of Asagi's team. If they hadn't stopped them, and the assassins had found Kabato and eliminated her, Ayaka would have lost all self-control. That would have spelt doom for every single one of them. The next day, Touka and his band of mercenaries resume their journey after getting some rest through the night. Eve leads the party forward, but Touka senses that Saras is uneasy, which puzzles him. Saras stops abruptly and calls out to him. She admits that she has a confession to make, but she lacks the courage to say the words. She asks permission to take several years to work up the courage, and she begs Touka to be patient with her. Touka doesn't understand why she made such an unexpected request, but he decides to oblige. Saras is grateful he agrees because she is scared of losing his trust if she confesses abruptly. She is also scared that she may be in a one-sided relationship, so she doesn't want to erase all certainty and end up in the friend zone by asking. She plans to use her years of allowance to build something special with Touka, so he couldn't possibly reject her request. They resume their journey, but Touka has already figured out what Saras wanted to ask. He decides to leave things as they are since she isn't comfortable enough to confess her feelings. Until then, he silently vows to always lead as the captain of the Lord of the Flies, while she promises to remain his sword and always act as the extension of his right arm. They continue their journey and arrive at an area of the forest with magic seals on the trees. Touka advises everyone to be cautious because the seals could be traps that alert the witch to their presence. Saras points out that the seals are so old and damaged that they may not activate even if they step on one. Touka hopes the witch hasn't succumbed to the slow degradation of time because their journey would have been for nothing. Liz points out a structure with more seals, and they approach it, but it suddenly springs to life and morphs into a golem. The golem tries attacking them, but Touka immobilizes it with his paralysis spell. Touka figures out that the golem is a security measure used by the witch to ward off invaders. Eve suggests shattering it, but Touka disagrees because he doesn't want to give off hostile impressions to the witch. They move further down the path, and they come across a little cottage beside a lake. They go inside and go down into the basement to find an army of little stone golems mining away at the rocks. Touka is relieved that the golems are not hostile because it would have been a headache to subdue them with magic. They walk down the tunnel and arrive at a door with a magic lock. Touka observes the lock and realizes that the witch placed a high magic input requirement for the door to open. Touka infuses the lock with some magic, and they open the door to a completely different dimension. They're dumbfounded by the witch's ability to fit a whole dimension into a little cellar door at the bottom of her basement. The witch steps out of her rock castle, and Touka immediately recognizes her. She speaks with them in an ancient elf language, but most of them can't understand her. Only Saras can communicate with her. She introduces herself as Erica, and she confirms that she is the witch of taboo they have been looking for. Touka is relieved that the first part of his quest is now complete. He's certain that she can decipher the ancient scrolls of forbidden magic, and then he will be able to begin his quest for revenge against the goddess Vicious. Meanwhile, the goddess Vicious can sense that the demon forces are making a move. She immediately orders the four saints to recall the heroes from their mission so they can make plans against prospective attacks. She is eager to see how much the heroes have grown and how much stronger they will be when they return.